big push to put diversity into the FAA's program. Then another article, the Federal Aviation Administration, this was before I got to office, recently, second term. The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine? These are people. Standards for those who work in our aviation system. I changed the Obama standards from very mediocre at best to extraordinary. You remember that. Only the highest aptitude, they have to be the highest intellect and psychologically superior people were allowed to qualify for air traffic controllers. That was not so prior to getting there. When I arrived in 2016, I made that change very early on because I always felt this was a job that, and other jobs too, but this was a job that had to be superior intelligence, and we didn't really have that, and we had it. And then when I left office and Biden took over, he changed them back to lower than ever before. I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first. Then they put politics at a level that nobody's ever seen, because this was the lowest level. Their policy was horrible, and their politics was even worse.
What a repulsive display. Just gross. I say it all the time. Donald Trump is a psychopath. Not psychotic. That's very different. He is a stone cold psychopath, like Ted Bundy. Yeah. And surprise, he's lying. He did not raise standards for air traffic controllers, and President Biden did not lower them. Neither did President Obama. That is a bold-faced lie. Shocker. My name is Suri Crowe, and you're watching the MeidasTouch Network. Well, this is where we are now. We can't remotely expect the president to behave like a human in the middle of a national tragedy. As David Axelrod points out, even as the hunt for bodies continues, and before an even preliminary probe could be completed, the president incredibly, despicably appears to blame the plane crash in Washington on DEI programs at the FAA and turns a moment of national tragedy into a craven political opportunity. Of course he does. And as the Associated Press has in this headline here, Trump fires heads of TSA, Coast Guard, and guts key aviation safety advisory committees. So the person who's making flying less safe is Donald Trump. It is not President Obama nor President Biden. It's Trump. And furthermore, it was Trump and his first buddy, Elon Musk, who gutted all federal aviation safety agencies within days of getting into office. And it was just revealed that staffing was in fact not normal in the air traffic control tower at the time of the crash, in an FAA preliminary report released today, that just one air traffic controller was working 2 positions at the time. And it is Trump himself who has frozen air traffic control hiring. And that was released in this memo from the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, where they were talking about how incredibly dangerous this is to freeze hiring of ATC or air traffic control hiring when they're already strapped, they're already short. This has been an ongoing problem, a shortage of air traffic control workers. So, and upon Trump entering office, co-president Elon Musk demanded that the head of the FAA step down and resign, which is exactly what he did. Trump bragged about ending DEI, which, allow me to translate for you, means getting rid of anyone who is female, black, brown, disabled, or queer. Basically anyone who is not a straight white man. And Senator Chris Murphy was not having it.
Tragedy last night, and it was disgusting. It was disgusting. First of all, our hearts go out to the victims' families, to the first responders. This is awful. But what is also awful is to watch the President of the United States stand up at the White House and claim that it is women or black people or Latinos working at the FAA that caused this crash. This idea that by hiring non-white men, you are putting the nation's safety in jeopardy, or that non-white men caused this crash, is unconscionable. We need to get to the bottom of what happened. Nobody's going to know today what caused that crash. But what we absolutely know is that it is not women working at the FAA that caused that crash. What we definitely know, it is not black employees at the FAA that caused that crash. There are some true things. President Trump forced out of office the administrator of the FAA. He's been waging a regular assault on public employees since he came into office. He forced the entire Aviation Security Review Board, Advisory Board, to step down. We don't know whether those things had anything to do with this crash, but we should take the time to get to the facts. And everybody in this country should be outraged that Donald Trump is standing up on that podium lying to you, deliberately lying to you about what the cause was, and further using the White House as a means to try to divide us from each other. That performance was disgraceful, and every single senator and member of Congress should call him out for how disgraceful it was.
People who were killed, and you are blaming Democrats and DEI policies and air traffic control and seemingly the member of the U.S. military who was flying that Black Hawk helicopter. Don't you think you're getting ahead of the investigation right now?
No, I don't think so at all. I don't think with the names of the people, you mean the names of the people that are on the plane, you think that's going to make a difference?
Does it comfort their families?
They are a group of people that have lost their lives. If you want a list of the names, we can give you that. We'll be giving that very soon. We're in coordination with American Airlines. We're in coordination very strongly, obviously, with the military. But I think that's not a very smart question.
But are you
I'm surprised coming from you.
Are you blaming
please.
Just want to give a shout out to Caitlin Collins. As we know, CNN is going full fascist, but she's doing a good job, so good for her. Trump blamed former Biden Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg, just saying really ugly things about him, blaming him too. But Secretary Pete was not having it. He posted this: despicable. As families grieve, Trump should be leading, not lying. We put safety first, drove down close calls, grew air traffic control, and had 0 commercial airline crash fatalities out of millions of flights on our watch. President Trump now oversees the military and the FAA. One of his first acts was to fire and suspend some of the key personnel who helped keep our skies safe. Time for the president to show actual leadership and explain what he will do to prevent this from happening again. Yeah, that is the bottom line. When you are the leader of the nation, it is your job and responsibility to stand up and take responsibility and explain to the American people how this happened and how you will take responsibility for not letting it happen again. But that is the absolute opposite of what Donald Trump does in every situation, where he is blaming. It's never his fault. Just complete malignant narcissist psychopath. Ugh. Well, and this is the amazing insight we got from Trump's Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, of the reality show Road Rules fame.
Cut across this departure path?
So, I don't know if you all could hear the question. It's a question about the flight path of the helicopter. I don't want to go into too much detail about the information we have from the FAA, but obviously it is not standard to have aircraft collide. I want to be clear on that. But prior to the collision, the flight paths that were being flown from the military and from American, that was not unusual.
Oh my God, I can't even. Really, Sean, that's not standard for planes to collide in midair? Thank you for pointing that. That's not standard. That's not what we're going for. Good to know. He also admitted that he hadn't spoken to the air traffic controllers who were in the tower at the time of the fatal crash. And my question is, what the actual were you doing then? What are you doing? Like you are now the head of the transportation department for the entire United States. What are you doing? And it just made me think of the flawless way that Secretary Pete Buttigieg would have been handling this tragedy. Of course, we didn't have one on his watch, but if there were, Secretary Pete would have been like, he would have had it together. He would have a team. They would have already spoken to the air traffic controllers who were in the tower at the time. There would be no holes that are going on with this completely inept Trump administration. And another inept cabinet pick, the credibly accused sexual predator, alcoholic, wholly unqualified Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, who was busy making back-to-back appearances on Fox, talking about stripping away decorated military heroes, General Mark Milley's stars, and removing his security detail, which is another whole take I'll have to do because it's so just repulsive and gross. Instead of showing up at the scene of this horrific plane crash where a military Black Hawk helicopter went down, no sign of Hegseth there, just absolute ineptitude. The class, grace, and empathy of President Biden and Vice President Harris is long gone from our nation's capital, even though it hasn't even been 2 weeks since they left office. Both of them released compassionate statements about the horrific crash, the kinds of statements that a nation craves from its leaders during a tragedy like this. Leaders who have empathy, a trait that Donald Trump wholly lacks. He does not care a lick about these victims' families who are now in extreme anguish. Here's what I know. We are not even 12 days into Trump's regime, and it is a disaster. A disaster. Federal programs that literally keep people alive have been cut off or frozen. Inspectors general that protect our tax dollars have been fired. Prosecutors who look out for criminal justice have been illegally fired. Planes are falling out of the sky. And the billionaires are lining their pockets and laughing as chaos ensues. This is just, it's not going to end well. It won't. But we're here to document it and call it out. My heart and my prayers go out to the families of the plane crash and the military Black Hawk victims as well. It is just so awful and tragic. And they deserve so much better than the psychopath in chief, Donald Trump, and his completely inept officials handling this. It's not right. We all deserve better. My name is Suri Crowe. Thank you so much for watching, and try to get some peace.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.